Well, welcome everyone. It's really exciting to have you all here today for what is most certainly going to be a fantastic discussion around one of the coolest VR experiences of the recent year. It's really an honor for us as chairs of the VR/AR Association's Travel and Tourism Committee to be helping to facilitate this conversation. And we have some distinguished panelists who Lynn will introduce, but just want to welcome all of you from around the world. We think we have many thousands of you. And it's really, I think, a treat for us to share this conversation with you and to invite your questions. So as you're hearing the presentations, please be thinking about your questions, and we'll be happy to discuss those in our last segment. I would love to introduce my co-chair, Lynn Rosenthal.
Thanks, Craig. Yes, I'm Lynn Rosenthal. I started my career evaluating content at age 5. We were a Nielsen family in Peoria, Illinois. So at that young age, I felt like I was responsible for some of your favorite programming back then. You're welcome, Donny Osmond, David Cassidy, and the Fonz. But since then, I have been curating content for my current company, which is I'm the founder and CEO of PeriscapeVR, and we launched the first ever virtual reality experience center in an airport. And while in London last year, I was out for the VR Awards and had the amazing privilege of getting to experience the King Tut VR experience. And so I'd like everyone to go around and introduce themselves, and then have Chadwick take it from there and sort of take a deeper dive into the experience. But it was magical. It allowed me to, it took me off to ancient Egypt, and Jennifer's chairs made it just, the direction and production was fantastic, Joel, and Jennifer's chairs just made it magical. So a big, this is a huge treat to have this group together today. So Joel, would you please introduce yourself and tell us about, producing and directing this amazing project?
Sure. My name is Joel Newton. I'm a director and one of the producers on Tutankhamun Enter the Tomb. My company, CityLights, we focus on premium immersive content. And so when we saw this incredible photogrammetry that the team, Elliot and the Experience team had put together for this experience inside of King Tut's tomb, we just knew that this was the type of project that we wanted to get really invested in and involved with. And for us, it was kind of combining, I've always been a huge fan of photogrammetry, like bringing completely photoreal places and experiences into like a 6DoF headset. And so combining that with some good Hollywood craft around camera work and sound design and music, we had an incredible score. We should have had Rob on this panel. Rob Garza from Thievery Corp was our composer. And it was just a super fun project. Everyone on this panel brought like their A game, and all of our expertise together, I think made something that has, in the coolest way, it's allowed kids in the UK to go on a field trip to King Tut's tomb. And I think that virtual experiential learning, that educational capacity that VR brings in a way that no picture in a textbook would ever give those kids that memory of being inside the tomb and learning about King Tut that way. So yeah, excited to let everyone on the panel kind of talk about all the different roles we all played together.
Jennifer, tell us about yourself and your incredible company.
Yes, I'm Jennifer, and I'm one of the founders of Positron. We are a company just laser focused on bringing awe and wonder through immersive storytelling to all audiences. And that really is a mission that we've orbited around for the last, almost 5 years. And that has looked very different each year, as everyone knows on this panel and a lot of the audience who's tuning in. It's been pretty light speed over the last few years on how all of the different facets required to bring an experience to a guest it's evolved a lot. And I think I'm super excited to be here today. And this project in particular, for me, you know, personally, and for our company Positron, I think represents the absolute best in all the facets that it took: the production value, the subject matter, the storytelling, the exhibition partner with Anthony's team. And, you know, we got to have kind of a full VR theater that absolutely was open to the public. You could buy a ticket. And I think it really was magical. And Positron was able to kind of get an environment set up where all of the ticket holders could come in and experience this. So I'm excited to kind of talk through that a little bit more today, and happy to be here.
So Anthony, say hello.
Hi, I'm Anthony Tann. I'm currently president of World Heritage Exhibitions, and at the time of this project, I led that team at IMG for the partnership between everyone on this call. As soon as Elliot showed us the photogrammetry a few years ago, the same as Joel, you know, we were immediately bought in, and as soon as Elliott's team told us that Joel's company was getting involved to direct and produce the VR experience, you know, we had to go forward and, you know, create some type of partnership. You know, and then Jennifer's team brought in these amazing chairs, and it, you know, just was everything that we would expect and want to put in a blockbuster exhibition. You know, we only want the best, and that's what everyone on this call delivered.
Awesome, thank you. So Elliot?
Sure. So my name's Elliot Mizroch. I'm one of the producers on King Tut Enter the Tomb, and the co-founder of CityLights. So when we started CityLights really with the goal of taking people places they couldn't normally go. And so in the beginning, we were making 360 video and kind of in the same vein as Felix and Paul. But then we saw what the realities.io guys were doing with photogrammetry, and just absolutely fell in love with, you know, the hyper realism and the 6DoF immersion of what photogrammetry can bring. So we, you know, pivoted the whole company to basically just doing that. And luckily, CuriosityStream, you know, sort of believed in what we were doing and financed a trip to Egypt via their producer connections. We got, you know, hooked up with, you know, access to the tombs and, you know, all the things that we didn't know how to do, they helped us with. And then 2017, we captured Nefertari's tomb, which is another experience we did free on Steam. And one great piece of advice that the legendary, you know, Steve Burns from the Discovery Channel told me, he said, "You never leave Egypt without getting something with King Tut in it, because everybody wants to see King Tut." And so the last day we were there, we shot the tomb of King Tut, just got the photography, no plans, you know, no budget to render it out, and took it home. And, you know, 2-3 years later, you know, here we are with a fantastic, you know, complete virtual reality experience. You know, thanks to the team at CityLights and IMG.
You did an amazing job. It really, truly looks, it's mind-blowing. So Chadwick, would you please take it from here and take a little bit deeper dive and sort of kick this off?
Yeah, thanks. You know, for generations, visiting World Heritage sites has been an exclusive privilege for people with good health and fortune. However, with the emergence of these higher quality headsets and lower cost immersive tech, the ability to democratize access to these locations, including King Tut's tomb, is now possible. So we were fortunate in 2019 to bring this crack team of folks together to produce this photorealistic virtual reality experience based on King Tut called Enter the Tomb. It's an 8-minute experience directed by Joel, produced by myself, Elliot Mizroch, and several others, and it was both a critical and financial success, which I think is important to a lot of the folks listening in today. What can I do in the travel and tourism and exhibition space? Am I just throwing money out the window, or is there a way to build a business model? We were especially fortunate to have an exhibition partner such as Anthony Tann, because we had a guaranteed audience that had proven through their tickets to the artifact exhibit that they were interested in the subject matter. It didn't hurt that we were also praised in several outlets that gave us rave reviews, including Forbes, calling the experience astonishing and one of the top things to do when you're in London. And if you've ever been to London, there's a lot of things to do. So to be on that list was pretty exciting. Last but not least, starting this year, before the craziness that is COVID-19, we won a Lumiere Award from the Advanced Imaging Society for the best VR education experience of last year. To wrap it all up, the photorealistic version of the tomb's genuine environment and artifacts was recreated to look as it did when it was discovered almost 100 years ago by Howard Carter. Audiences can now explore the ancient rooms that tell the story of Tut's life, his death, and the journey through the Egyptian afterlife, all while seated in an immersive motion platform, which Jennifer can talk about in a second. It simulates the sensation of floating. So in short, the VR experience event of the tomb enabled audiences in London and soon other parts of the world and potentially classrooms and living rooms to virtually enter the tomb of Tutankhamun.
So Craig, you want to get started? I think you have a few questions, right?
Hello, everybody. Yes, just to introduce myself quickly. So I am Craig Vezina. I'm the co-founder of Realcast, a really cool XR company based here in Paris, France. And we do have a special interest in travel and tourism. We're excited to get into some of the questions for this fantastic project. Maybe Elliot, we can start with you, just to focus a bit on the origins of the project and your beliefs in educational immersive experiences and their power. How did this educational immersive project actually begin?
So it's a funny story. I mean, like I was saying before, we had seen some of the work that the Realities IO guys had done, which were just sort of nondescript. If I remember correctly, it was like a dilapidated warehouse somewhere in Eastern Europe. But it was fantastic. It was hyper realistic. You could walk around it. You could pick things up off the floor. And so I looked to my partner, Andrew, and just said, we have to do this, at a meaningful place. And so after talking to the team at CuriosityStream and they had some Egyptian programming coming up the following year, they were able to give us a budget to go to Egypt and do Nefertari's tomb. And, like I said before, we had just shot Tut's tomb on a whim, not knowing what to do with it. And this all just came together serendipitously and worked out great.
So I'd like to ask a question of Joel. So 2022 will be the 100th anniversary, the 100th celebration of the discovery of King Tut's tomb. So what are your plans to align with the date? Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, the tour that we opened in London was kind of like the second, well, really the third city of the tour. They kind of tested Anthony can speak to this. They tested it in LA and then had a grand opening in Paris. And then they were in London for, well, not quite 6 months. COVID shut it down a little early. The plan was to move to Boston and then keep touring more cities. Anthony, I think you could speak to what the original plan was. I think we're all, kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen around the world as different museums reopen. But the plan for the tour was to go about 6 months in a major city and then go to another major city and another major city and spend the anniversary year kind of expanding that anniversary beyond just one calendar year into a full world tour. So that was part of what made the underwriting and the excitement around going with the full Positron theater and the full production value that we were able to put into this. because we had this, amazing global tour as kind of an anchor partner to get this VR experience to the crowd of people that are interested in TUT, even if they've never done VR before.
Well, hopefully you'll be back on tour soon, because this deserves to go to the masses. And I think when I saw it in London, you had the next 10 cities lined up already. So as VR seems to be starting to reopen in different parts of the world, hopefully you'll be sliding into museums in those areas that are opening. So I have sort of a three-part question here for you, Joel. When this project was pitched to you, what drew you to it as a producer and director? And what was your vision of this very important discovery? And what drew you into TUT?
So as a director, what drew me into TUT and what drew me into this project is, really learning more about just the incredible redemption story, the almost like amazing, like multi-millennium joke that Tut and his wife and their love kind of played on the society that tried to erase him. Learning that he became king as a young age. His father was very unpopular because he had tried to move and change their culture, really changed their religion. And Tut was crippled, which to ancient society was not nearly as inclusive as we are today. Like they saw that as like a real sign of his weakness, or that he couldn't be a great leader. I think there were a lot of adult men, not unlike the sidekicks to kings in most Disney movies, who wanted the power for themselves and wanted to control this young kid and kind of silence him. And the vizier, I believe, took over as soon as he died, which kind of revealed his ambitions. But when Tut died young, they didn't give him the grand burial that most pharaohs would receive. They crammed him into this tiny little extra tomb that wasn't even necessarily prepared for a pharaoh. They didn't put him on the map of kings. They erased his name from a lot of statues. Tons of artifacts have Tut's names like destroyed or scratched out. They truly tried to erase him from their history. And in doing that, his tomb remained hidden forever. And every other grand and incredible tomb got raided and picked through, and there was nothing left by the time you get to the modern world. And then in 1922, they unopened this tomb that has been completely, flawlessly sealed for thousands of years. And the kid who they all tried to erase ends up becoming the most famous Egyptian pharaoh of them all. He's toured, he's better than the Rolling Stones. He's toured for decade after decade after decade after decade. Everywhere he goes, a crowd of 1 million people show up. And so there is a longer narrative piece about his life that we prepared. And, there's probably a few core technologies that need to develop further for us to ever make that VR experience. But even as we were developing it, just falling in love with that redemption story, like that irony that's kind of like you tried to make him not live forever, and instead he became the most eternal voice from that generation, that era. As a producer, I do think that the timeless and global nature of the IP really excited us in terms of any investment we're going to do in VR, AR. We know it's early days right now, and so we really want to stay away from content that is too time-stamped to the moment it's released. Like movie releases are huge and all the revenue happens so fast. But I think with any VR content, we're looking at things that can still be very relevant to audiences 5 years, 10 years down the road. And so looking at this tour that was mapped out for years, not months, felt like a really good fit for a big budget, high production value VR experience. That said, we've learned a lot about being at museums and we love it. And so we're looking for more opportunities to get VR into museums. I think it's kind of a best case scenario to bring the educational power of VR, the immersive nature, knowing how people learn and how kids today are so drawn to the technology of it, that we think it's a real Trojan horse for learning and for education, and want to definitely make more projects like this if we can find more museums to work with.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear you're so bullish on the future of out-of-home entertainment. We are too, and super excited to see this project roll out. So Chadwick, what was your role here? And I know you were a producer on it, and sort of how did that come to pass?
Yeah, anybody interject if you disagree. I think it was many hats at different moments in this project, from connecting some dots, getting some negotiations across the finish line, and pushing a broom with Jennifer when we landed in London to just get everything ready and good to go. I think that for the folks listening in that were, Joel went on, what do you want?
Well, I was going to say also, don't forget about almost dying in your trips around the world. Like
Yeah. International exploration with Mr. Mizroch, and there are so many stories to be told on this. One day it'll be beyond a panel. We'll all get together, have a fireside chat, and write a book. I think for the folks listening on that are interested in either hiring a team like this, and they go, what is a lead producer? What is a producer on a project like this? The job is to be kind of a central conduit between all these really talented parties. And if someone from the platform Positron side has a question on timing for the development team, and the creative team wants to connect with the original producers on the core, our job was to organize that data, focus on what's possible in the time constraint, because the time constraint was really limited to Joel's vision that he mentioned before. It was awesome, but we did have a deadline of IMG was looking for us to launch alongside their November 2019 launch. And when you're building an immersive, interactive experience and you start in 2019 and you deliver in 2019, you have to focus on what's possible. Pretty much anything's possible if you have unlimited resources and time, but we did not have either of those. And then the other job is to get everything delivered on time and on budget, because if people are spinning in a chair and it's a black screen, they're going to want their money back. The last thing I'll say for producing a project like this, especially a sensitive subject matter like this, was to inject core principles to the entire team so everybody can kind of have a bias for action. And those have been alluded to throughout the conversation so far, but really in this order, it was respect. This was and is a God to many. Authenticity. If it wasn't a fact, it wasn't part of our experience. We had the team from IMG that had decades of experience in this subject matter, but we also brought on Egyptologists to ensure anything that we wrote or put on screen was in fact accurate. And then last but not least, entertaining, educational. Learning can be fun. We wanted this educational experience to feel like a ride to the past. So everybody that's on this call is really on the ship leading the charge. And what we tried to be, myself and my colleague, Louis Silverstein, Ian Donahue, we were kind of like the ballast of the ship, just trying to help make sure it stayed upright, things got delivered. And when people showed up in London and we tried to carnival bark them to the immersive theater, they left with a smile on their face.
So what tools and technologies were leveraged to create this experience?
Yeah, so this is a great piece of information for all the non-technical people listening if they want to get into this space. For all the future Spielbergs or all the future exhibition folks that want to layer in immersive, I can't emphasize enough the importance of even a high-level understanding of how game engines work. Especially Unreal and Unity. There are other options for sure, but just to understand the basics of what those tools are, how much someone's time costs, and what is possible. Using these tools, without these tools, this project would have been impossible, or at least impossible in the time constraint. So if someone in our audience is interested in creating an experience with the impact, the look, the feel, the sensation, you will need experts from the interactive or gaming industry. I will say, Joel mentioned this earlier, so did Elliot, but in addition to game engines, we use the latest technologies in recreating 3D environments and artifacts. This can be done through a process known as photogrammetry, which is you take a bunch of photos and recreate, but you can also use reference images. And I can't implore enough how great the team at the third floor was. They do a lot of pre-viz for big feature films for Disney and major studios. but looking at archival footage. TUT is one of the most documented discoveries of all time, which is great. So you can effectively look at a lot of this IP that's available and look at it and recreate certain pieces, such as the shrine that's in the burial chamber. I'll also just end with this. I'm currently working and consulting with Diamond LA. They're a leader in accessibility. And fortunately, this entire team was also focused on ensuring the experience was accessible to all. And I have to give a special shout out to Jennifer on her guidance and adherence to best practices here, because for all the folks on this call, transferring into a chair might be a simple task, but on day one, I was proud that we had offerings to folks that were hearing impaired, unable to transfer from their wheelchair, and were able to travel and enter the tomb of Tutankhamun, because we were ahead of the curve on that. We wanted to make sure that there was no issues with regards to ensuring this experience was an enjoyable experience for folks that potentially had accessibility requirements. So special shout out to Jennifer on that. Thank you. Learned a lot. And I think that that's another piece that's important in this story. It's a great experience, but it's a great experience for all.
So I know that everyone here is very focused on sort of I mean, you can tell I have a clean box in my home office. So we're all thinking about what life looks like and what, in your case, immersive theater looks like in a post-COVID world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Hey, Jennifer, I know you've been talking about Positron theaters as a wonderful kind of COVID-friendly alternative to the old way of doing theaters.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of a bad joke, I think, at this point, but we were saying, that Positron has been kind of physically distancing before it was required, in that our seats are naturally placed in a theater setup 6.5 feet apart. So, I think there is opportunity, in a Positron layout for managing the flow of how guests are seated. And, really it's about the protocols, I think, for everyone who's considering, anything that is out of home entertainment, especially with immersive now. To Lynn's point, you have to think about deeper levels of sanitization. You have to think about gating, how you're bringing guests into the space, and what the touch points are, right, between the hosts who are managing the space and managing the guests and the guests themselves. And so I believe that in updating those protocols, I think it's, I really think it's possible, to operate something that, that still is able to bring this level of excitement and, again, that sense of like, I can't, I think we all want to kind of crack the nut on what can we bring into people's homes. And that's an equally as important thread. But at least this group here today, and I think we can all say that when we have the opportunity to curate a space that becomes a destination, we can do things that you can't do in your home today. And it's really an opportunity to treat humans to the highest level of storytelling. And I think that's what we were able to do in London with this, and hopefully as the whole entourage picks back up and is able to open in certain parts of the world. And I think paying attention to things like just updating a lot of the operational plans for how to do that. It's going to be possible. So
we were incredibly fortunate when we started. We're manufacturing our 2.0 towers, and we built in CleanBox because we didn't want to have problems. We're fully automated, so we didn't want our towers to, anyone to get pink eye or anything. And it turns out they get their, biohazard level 3 verification and are very close to FDA approval. And So they killed it. Their product kills the coronavirus in a minute and 5 seconds. So, you know,
It's in our models now. You have to add the minute and the 5 seconds, right? Turnaround time. It's all part of my model.
exactly.
Yeah.
So tell me, Jennifer, with your seated experience with the motion platform, why was it the best experience for this particular exhibition?
I mean, I'll back it up and make a generalization and then say why I think it's also the best for this particular production. And so I think the most important thing to do with whether it's VR or AR, anything that has the word technology in it, is to make that disappear when we're trying to tell stories. And something that I think was a milestone, at least for me, around this was that we were not selling tickets to VR. We were selling tickets to come and be part of Tutankhamun's, history, and to be part of that story. And very, very little terminology around "come see this VR thing," right, was ever used. And I think that that's the point. So Positron has from day one thought very deeply about how are we getting people into the story, not how are we spinning a chair so that they feel the motion, not how cool is this because it's VR. We don't sell technology, we sell the experience. So I think that this was a great example of that, what was done in London and what will be done in the future for this type of exhibition. The other piece of this, and we've touched on it, is around accessibility. And so I think about that in terms of physical ability, but also age groups. So, Anthony will know these stats on the back of his hand, but, one of the highest age demographics that come into museum spaces, are folks who are 60 and older. And there are limitations right now with the form factor of a lot of immersive tech, and for asking people who are 60 and older to strap on a ton of gear, stand in place, or whatever we're asking them to do is uncomfortable, right? Or not something that they may be drawn to. So a big part of what we want folks to feel when they enter a space is, it's a chair, right? Everybody feels comfortable sitting in a chair. And if we can hide all the cables, and if we can tuck away as much of the tech as possible and welcome them into a space, and the form factor of, in particular, a Positron chair as it stands today, is really about cocooning you in your own personal theater, right? So sort of the richness of the seat, and the fact that there's already natural soundproofing when you get in. It's to protect you as we're sort of making this exchange for, you come into this space, and in a very kind of lightweight way, we're going to transport you to another place. And we focus on that to the finest detail, actually, in the way that we've built our product, in the way that we've set up our operations. And so that, I think, for this particular production and this particular project, being able to accommodate 8-year-olds and 100-year-olds in the same space, and that they all could have the same experience is really important. It does also sell more tickets. So back to the spreadsheet, really important in thinking through how to open spaces that have the economics that we're looking for and can serve the widest possible audience.
So both you and Chadwick have alluded to people coming in with physical limitations. Can you dive into how you help them, get into the chair and how that worked?
Yeah, so we're some of that comes into even the layout when we are evaluating the space for how the theater is set up. We're always looking at what are the access points. We will identify particular seats in the theater that can be approached by wheelchairs or whatever the accessibility equipment is that the guest is coming in with. And then there's very clear protocols for the talk track and for how to ask the guest if they feel comfortable being assisted into the seat. And because of the seat depth of our seat, you can, most people, when they're coming in, at least in our experience, have asked if they can be assisted into the seat and that they're able to be moved into the seat. And then there is always a space for their wheelchair. And the movement of the chair is such that it is safe for them to go through the experience. And at that point, they're really able to have the exact same experience that everybody is. And so with the full motion experience. We also think through, for those folks who are unable to get out of a wheelchair, the cable length of the headset and headphones that we use have been specially measured so that actually, every seat, the cable length, if the wheelchair is pulled up next to the theater seat, that all the cables reach comfortably, and we're able to very quickly essentially disable the motion on the seats, so that there's no motion or there's no hazard in the space for that guest. And then they're able to see a version of the content when they're not in motion in the seat. So it actually just really comes down to being thoughtful about what is it that your guests coming through the door are going to expect or need in order to have kind of to be part of the experience. And it's just, I think through experience of lots and lots of kind of, touch points with the public and seeing what was important to people, we've just really thought through a lot of that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anthony, I wonder if we can focus for a minute on the future of exhibitions. And with this particular project, how valuable was it to deploy this immersive experience alongside a world-renowned exhibit like Tutankhamun Treasures?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to talk about why VR is a natural evolution into the exhibition space, and bring it back to how the privatization of exhibition production came to be. And that was when looking at an exhibition space and placing it at a museum, there's a guaranteed user base that's already there. And that's the same principles that we took in the business model for this VR experience. In my eyes, in order to normalize, this type of experience, you at first have to attach it to, blockbuster events that gives people the ability to take a deeper dive into the content that they're already going to explore. So in the future, I think it's important for everyone on this call to focus on, finding natural content flow into experiences that are already extremely popular, and that is to normalize it with our consumer base, so that when we do bring experiences outside of these environments, people already know what to expect and they want to join. So I'm very bullish on the future of exhibitions, and I believe strongly that next year these experiences will make a comeback, and along with that, the evolution of VR experiences within museums is an important factor to that. And like Jennifer and Joel were alluding to, there's precautions that are naturally built into VR experiences that make an operational aspect of this, very fluid, and the fact that we're already cleaning equipment, we're already sterilizing everything that everyone's touching, because these things are touching people's faces, their eyes, their ears. You know, these are all points that bacteria can enter. So, you know, evolving that sanitation process isn't hard, and it allows us to keep high throughput. So making people feel safe is also an important factor in, you know, the future of this space as well.
And so to that point, you know, in the face of COVID and all of these health concerns, how do you see these in-person events evolving over the next year or in the short-term horizon, or even potentially over the next decade?
Yeah, I think starting with the short-term horizon, at least until there's a vaccine, we're gonna see low attendance numbers. But I strongly feel there's gonna be a rebound within the marketplace and later in 2021, maybe Q3, Q4, where we start seeing an increase in, you know, consumers coming out and wanting to get out of their house and experience things that, you know, they've lost over the past year and a half. And if you look at historic data of, you know, experiences that are within China right now, you're seeing a huge influx of, you know, ticket purchases for, you know, the Jurassic experience and, you know, all these other places that are currently opening. So I know that in the future, things will go back to normal.
Elliot, if I may, I just want to circle back to you because I have a special passion for education and agree with you that VR has such incredible potential for education. Maybe you could speak a little bit more about that in terms of, you know, do you see this as the future of education?
Absolutely. I mean, just to piggyback off of what Joel was saying at the top of the call, you know, I really think this is like a Trojan horse for education. And I knew that the moment we had the model done in Unreal Engine, and I put my 7-year-old niece into a HTC Vive, I believe it was a Vive, it could have been a DK1. And, you know, she, you know, I was trying to explain to her how to use the controllers, and she kind of just said, I got it. You know, I handed her the controllers, and she was silent for 5 minutes and walked around the tomb, and then took the headset off and looked at me like as if she had just been there, and started to ask me questions about who this person was and, you know, how they died, and, you know, and so to her it was like she had just traveled to Egypt, and she sort of checked that box off her list, and you know, was interested in Egypt. And so you could take that lesson and apply it to many things in a COVID era or post-COVID era, as far as transporting people. Like Chadwick said, they may not have the means to get to places, and you could create, you know, the next legendary Egyptologist out of somebody that may have otherwise never been to the country. And so I think it's really powerful just to take people places they wouldn't normally go, and just standing in a place with all that history, you know, is immense. And so I think that alone, you know, and we can build off of that as the technology grows, as far as feedback and interactivity and being able to, you know, decipher holograms on the walls. And Joel can maybe speak to, you know, future iterations of what this becomes. But, you know, I just think this is just the beginning. This guided experience, this 8-minute experience can just only grow from here.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think the power of photogrammetry, the power of like volumetrically imaging and scanning priceless, precious things is also incredibly contributory to their preservation, right? Like we've now scanned some of King Tut's stuff in a way that a researcher could interact with it in a VR headset, look at it. You know, it's like, you can't go to the library and check out these artifacts. You know, you can check out a book about the artifacts, but you can't check out and like look. But now, like, that capacity really is there. And of course, nothing will ever replace like the actual tomb, the actual artifacts. But I think if you look at like the 100 reasons a human being has had to touch and possibly risk rare artifacts like that, I think VR probably replaces 95 out of 100 cases where someone might need to handle one of those really delicate or rare items. And so once it's scanned, once we have that master recording that's fully volumetric, that you can pick it up and look at it and get really close and spend time with it. I know for me, spending time with the actual artifacts, it was powerful. You know, it's kind of like back in the a long time ago, the idea of putting things on TV and people being afraid that, oh, you know, the owner of the New York Jets famously said, like, if the Jets are on TV, nobody will, you know, schlep over to the stadium and buy a ticket in the snow. And the opposite's the truth, right? The more people have an experience with something in a mediated way or in a virtual way, there's going to be more and more people interested in the real thing. And so, you know, the future is going to be navigating, like, how many people actually get to go into the real tomb versus how many more millions of people who could never get to the real tomb will get to experience it virtually.
I think something to add to that, Joel, you mentioned like the beginning of this project to connect the team from IMG and Experius and CityLights. Our team was trying to connect all these dots and everybody had buy-in, but in April 15th, tax day of 2019, no agreement had been signed, but that was the day Notre Dame burnt. And so it was like, we were all buying into this, but it became a more spiritual mission of, oh, this isn't just how do you make an educational piece? It's how do you preserve history? How do you democratize access and travel? But that was a very interesting real world scenario where I don't know if anybody else had, but I've been to Notre Dame. It was very much a sad moment. And I realized that not only King Tut, but a multitude of experiences need to be at a minimum protected for future generations, at a maximum deployed immediately to a Positron theater at museums around the world, but at a minimum, what Elliot had been at the forefront of with regards to scanning environments and recreating things in 3D suddenly became really personal.
Outstanding. Well, we do have a little bit of time left where we can take some questions from our audience around the world. So please do submit those there in the chat box.